Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on third-party advertiser fundraising ahead of the fall referendum. But first, big tech's arrival in Alberta.
We are thrilled to announce that Sturgeon County, Alberta, will be home to Meta's newest data center, our first in Canada and our largest outside the U.S.
The parent company of Facebook and Instagram set to invest more than $13 billion, creating a 1 gigawatt data center north of Edmonton, the tech giant's 33rd globally, as it builds out support for the artificial intelligence boom. It's also partnering with Greenlight Electricity Project, a newly announced natural gas power generation facility. And Premier Danielle Smith joins us now. Premier Smith, good to see you. Appreciate the opportunity to chat again. And I want to start on this data center. There are lots of benefits here, job creation, added power production. To what degree, though, is this an actual $13 billion injection into the Alberta economy?
Well, it may ultimately end up being more than that, because this is just, there's multiple aspects to this. One was one that we announced last week with the Greenlight project. So that is a natural gas producer that is going to be taking the gas to the site. And then there's going to be Kineticor, which is the company that is going to be building out the natural gas plants to be able to power this, since they have chosen to go off grid. And then there's also the plant itself and the ongoing upgrade that will happen with the chips. And so we believe in this initial phase will be 300 jobs created for construction, 30 ongoing jobs. But the ongoing revenues, not only from royalties from the additional natural gas, but also the fact that being initially hooked to the power grid, they'll pay a portion of their transmission costs. That'll bring down the cost of electricity for everybody on their transmission bills. We think it'll be about $250 million a year at a minimum that this major project is going to be able to bring to the Alberta economy, so or the Alberta Treasury. So that's going to go a long way towards helping us address some of our needs.
How much has your government had to streamline regulations to draw a project of this scale? What makes Alberta's regulations more appealing than what a proponent might find in a competing province?
Well, I think the big thing we told them was, if you can bring your own power, then we can work with you. We've watched in other jurisdictions where that hasn't taken place, and there's been a lot of pushback in the community as they've watched their power prices go up. We know that because these are such large users of electricity, the only way to do it would be the way that our oil sands got developed. Our oil sands companies built their own power to manage their own need, and then when they had extra, they sold it back into the grid. So we thought, we've done it before with a different industry. Let's do it with this one. They also chose a good site. Sturgeon County has had an industrial zone for 40 years. And so the site that they're on is a site that had initially been intended for 12 refineries. So there's a lot of social acceptance in the community for these kinds of developments. And they've also, I think, learned a lot from other projects that they've done about water usage. So they're using what's called a closed loop system, which brings the water in once and uses it to circulate, and then an air cooling system so that they can minimize water uses. So I really feel like in working with them, we identified the problems we were hearing from the community, and they answered them one by one. And so that's why I think they enjoyed working with our concierge. It's been 2 long years, but I think we developed a model that should work.
Okay, so in landing such a big fish, what kind of door do you see being opened here to Alberta becoming data center central?
I think the projects have to be the right ones in the right place, and they have to do the work with the community. I talked to somebody because we had a delegation of Americans who were up over the last week enjoying the Stampede, and one was from Louisiana, and told me that in the county that they're located in, they are such a valued tenant and a valued partner that they do community benefits, they support community events. They even gave $50,000 for every teacher in the county, just as a thank you for the education that was going on in the school system. So I would say that we've got a company that understands that it's got to do that extra work to make sure that the community has support. And I hope that is a signal to other large hyperscalers that want to do the same thing. It's a pretty good model. Work with us. Let's find the location. Bring your own power. Let's work through the water issues. Let's get the community acceptance, and then we'll be able to have more of these come in. Not every one of them is going to get that level of acceptance. We've seen some hiccups in some other areas, but I think when they do it right, it demonstrates that they can get to a good result.
Okay, so with more data centers on the way, and just as your government addressed pushback by Albertans to wind and solar projects by implementing policy changes on the renewable sector, how are you addressing concerns already now being expressed by Albertans about data centers, things like noise, water use, even the handling of environmental assessments?
Well, I think on this one is pretty clear. By locating in an established industrial zone, bringing your own power, having a closed loop water system, the amount of water they're using is about the size of a typical golf course. That's just to give you some idea of the minimal amount of water that they're going to be using compared to perhaps what you might have read in other jurisdictions, and ensuring that we're locating away from residential homes. That's another part of it. If you're going to have this kind of heavy industrial, having a setback area so that you're not impacting neighbors. And also being on land that was already well accepted that was going to be industrial development. Those are the kind of keys I would say would be factors in future successful proponents. And we have a concierge service, as I mentioned, and we're prepared to work with anyone who wants to work with us on working through those problems.
What kind of reclamation requirements are being imposed on these data centers? That is certainly an element that drove policy changes around the renewable energy sector.
Well, I would say that these are pretty wealthy companies, as you know. I mean, this is all private sector funding, $13 billion just on this one alone. It'd be very similar to what you'd expect to see in any kind of industrial development. It's a little bit different because this is not going to be out in the middle of a farmer's field. I mean, when you look at what the issues were around solar panels and wind turbines, the issue was what happens at the end of life of those kinds of projects. Well, the end of life of a project like this, when you've got warehouse buildings, they can be repurposed to another warehouse. So I think it's a little bit of a different conversation, but it is part of the reason why it's so important to site them in well-established industrial areas that have the support of the community and the support of the local council. And so that's why we have to make sure that new projects that come forward also tick off a lot of the boxes. But that's why this one, I think, was able to find success after working with us for 2 years.
Okay, I'm hoping also to quickly follow up on the West Coast pipeline submission and the degree to which your government is prepared to backstop the project. How do you see Alberta paying for a significant share? Does it come by way of borrowing, surplus revenue, budgetary adjustments, cuts to services? How does it get paid for?
Well, I can tell you the model that we would put forward. So let's assume that it's about $40 billion, which would be at the high end. Normally what happens when you're financing this is 80% are financed by the banks through debt, and then 20% is equity financing. So if $10 billion has to be put in and shared between 4 partners, that's about $2.5 billion that would be our share. Maybe less if other private sector partners come forward. But to put up $2.5 billion in order to receive $1 trillion worth of value, not only from the pipeline itself, but from the extra 1 million barrels a day worth of production that it's going to unlock. I think that that's a pretty good investment. So not only will we get all of the revenue associated with 1 million barrels a day of additional production, but also the ongoing revenues that will come from the tolling. And we have seen that in the case of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, it's already returning $1.2 billion a year to the to the federal government. So these things become profitable very quickly when you get them on stream, and that's the key, is to get them on stream quickly. And it's the reason why we looked at the southern route, is that we think it can be built 2 to 3 years faster than one of the alternative routes.
As you point out, new pipelines require more oil production, which are already at record levels. How far are you prepared to go to stimulate investment in the oil sands, incentivize increased productions? Do you open the door to changing royalty frameworks?
We have done that in the past, and that's the conversation that we're having with the industry. A couple of the things that worked in the past, because remember, these are very capital-intensive projects, and so we've had royalty structures not only for oil sands, but also for conventional development, where they pay a lower royalty until the cost of their capital is recovered, and then it goes up to the higher royalty. And so that would be one of the things that we're talking with the industry about, where to set those levels. But another thing that was very helpful was accelerated capital cost allowance, so that essentially when you spend $1 in a year, you can write off 100% of that dollar, and that allows for them to recover their costs more quickly, get into profitability. And so those are the conversations we're having with the federal government to see if we can align that tax structure with something similar to what we've had in the past. We think those 2 elements should allow for the various companies to dust off some of the projects that had been on the shelf for the last decade or so and see if we can get them back into production.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time this evening, Premier Smith, in what's been a very busy week. Thank you kindly.
You bet. Thanks, Michael.
From Meta's mega-dollar data center to fundraising dollars driving referendum campaigns. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Sarah Elder, founder of the political fashion brand Madam Premier, host of the Briefing Note podcast and a former political staffer, and Jim Groom, political scientist, recently retired from Medicine Hat College. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with feeding the AI boom.
What we're talking about today is certainly bigger than any one municipality. It is about Alberta's future and Canada's place in a world that is rapidly changing.
Mayor of Sturgeon County on the announcement that Meta, the tech giant behind Facebook and Instagram, will build a $13 billion data center about 35 kilometers north of Edmonton, partnering in the process with a large natural gas power generation facility, also unveiled last week. Sarah, this is Alberta drawing in what's being called its first big hyperscaler. I think maybe the Premier used that terminology as well. And it's one of the largest private sector investments in the province. What kind of turning point are we looking at where data center development is concerned?
This is absolutely epic, and I am absolutely here for this kind of investment in Alberta's economy. And I don't want to sound too, pithy about it, but how nice is it not to be talking about separation yet, but also to be talking about investment in Alberta's economy, really good paying jobs, and the kind of investment that is going to diversify our economy and ensure that we are on a better, more stable financial track. And so I, as someone who is generally hesitant about data centers and the environmental impacts, I have to say I love this deal. I've looked at it, I've read the materials, and I am really impressed with the level of detail that the Alberta government was able to have Meta put up for this deal to actually take place. I am absolutely impressed.
Jim, Sarah kind of opened the door, but how do you see this landing with Albertans at a time when so much of the talk is either on pipelines or the divisive issue of separation?
Well, I think this is a win for the Premier for sure. She's got her ducks in a row. The government's got the ducks in a row. As Sarah says, it's really the gold standard. As long as it doesn't get derailed by some of the other data centers that have come in with less planning, less preparation, more water use, more pollution, locations, things of that nature. This has got all the bells and whistles that make it sound really good. And if you're going to start a project of this nature, a change project, then this is the best way to do it, with a well-planned, good location, support from the local community, minimum use of water, not even any talk of pollution really to speak of. So this is really a win for this one. We'll have to see how it goes from here, though. They don't want to piggyback on this and find that they're like the United States, where 14 states have put moratoriums on data centers.
Sarah, we heard from the Premier on this off the top this evening, and to pick up on some of Jim's points there, politically, how much of a win is an announcement like this for Danielle Smith, and how much does she need a win at this point?
You know what? I think she's doing really well. I mean, polling tells us that, if an election, based on the last polls that I think I recall seeing, that she would be winning probably a re-election campaign. So I think that this is actually just what I expect from a government. I expect attracting investment. I expect thoughtful policy making in terms of setting out the playing field and having high expectations of what we expect from private sector companies when they're going to be developing projects like this. This ticks all of the boxes for me. It's unfortunate that good things like this don't always get the the media attention. I mean, we're talking about it, but it's usually the bad things that that get it. So I think that this will go hopefully a long way in in furthering the UCP's conversation and what they're doing to attract investment and on the economy. The only thing I want to say is I want more of this all the time. Just all the time, more investments, more good news, more things that are going to create more good paying jobs for Albertans for generations to come.
Jim, we also heard from the Premier on the pipeline proposal that was handed over a week ago today. How much clarity do you see the Smith government delivering on questions Albertans might be looking to have answered on that?
I think it's been pretty inclusive, and I think been pretty comprehensive. And, one of the things I do like about the Premier is she does admit that they wanted the Northern Gateway type of an approach to it, and she realizes that wasn't going to fly, and she simply passed that as this is an acceptable alternative, and I think that helps her sell it when she sort of buys into it herself, and I think it's a much more palatable aspect. It's less conflict with BC, so it really does serve us well in that regard, I think.
Sarah, how easy a sell is it for this degree of public sector backing of this pipeline and not having the degree of private sector backing that was maybe expected going into this?
Well, I think it's just the reality of the situation because of the last decade of complete and total overreach by the federal government in Justin Trudeau's former 10-year reign. In my opinion, the federal government went out of their way to disincentivize and attract and retain investment in Canada's economy, specifically in the oil and gas sector. And so this is the climate that they've created. So we can understand why private sector proponents are going to be gun shy about making big investments because they've tried and they were unsuccessful, not only through climate policies, environmental processes, backlash from politicians themselves, dependent from different parties. So we've gone out of our way to make life difficult to do business in Canada. We need to keep changing the switch so that companies who want to do business here can. That's what we need to do.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, referendum campaigns and who's leading the way when it comes to third-party advertisers. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. Pro-separation groups registered as third-party advertisers are leading the way when it comes to fundraising for referendum campaigns.
I would like to think it's because we're doing a better job and have maybe a better message, but all of the pro-independence groups are important, as are the ones that are for Stay Canada. I mean, this is what democracy is about: full freedom of expression, free dialogue, civil discourse. Let Alberta Decide has raised nearly $250,000 in donations from roughly 1,000 Albertans in 3 weeks of operations. That compares to the roughly 26,000 raised by Stephen Carter's Alberta's Voice campaign, a pro-federalism movement that also opposes the 9 referendum questions focused on immigration and the Constitution. Jim, I'll go to you first this time. There are said to be 22 third-party advertisers so far registered with Elections Alberta. Each can raise a maximum of $607,000. What's to be made of how fundraising is flushing out at this point?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the polls. Of course, we've heard that almost 70% of Albertans want to remain in Canada. And so when you don't really think there's a fight going on, you can kind of sit back and relax a little bit and not donate your money. The other aspect here, of course, is the provincial government has said that they are in favor of staying with Canada and that they're going to promote that. And I think there's a feeling that, well, let's stand back a little bit and wait for them to do that. On the other hand, this is the opportunity for the separatists to make their move, to show that they are a viable alternative, at least that they're a going concern, you might say, and there's a lot of passion on that side, and I think that drives the fundraising more than almost anything else.
Sarah, with more dollars appearing to go to one side than the other, is that a worrisome dynamic where pro-Canada forces are concerned?
No. This is very evident to me in everyday politics when you look to see what's going on, and you can take it back to COVID and the community that was built out of people opposed to the vaccine, and where it's led us to where we are today, and that similar kind of the overlap in elements of that coalition. This is people who are pro separation are very committed. They're very outspoken. They are all in. They're going to the fundraisers. They're commenting on social media. They're buying. They're just in every way. And what the Remain side has going against it is just the complete and total apathy of people in assuming that they're going to get the result that they want, because they're not going to show up in the same way. They might make a post on X's or for once in a while, or on Blue Sky or wherever it is, but it's going to be really performative. It's going to be Canada flags outside, but whether they actually show up at the ballot box is something else. What I can guarantee is that the people who are pro Alberta separation are going to show up. And so, outside of raising money, it has to be, who are you going to be turning out at the ballot box to make your side the one that comes out on top?
All right, one more quick topic for us, and that's a petition calling on the federal government to halt the funding of Stornoway as private residence for the leader of the opposition. A petition launched by a Victoria, BC resident and sponsored by Green Party leader Elizabeth May. The petition is roughly 15,000 signatures and claims cutting the funding could be a cost-saving measure for the government. According to a 2021 report, Stornoway needs more than $1 million. I think it's $1.25 million in maintenance over the next decade. Sarah, how far do you see this petition moving the needle at a time when efforts are now underway to resurrect 24 Sussex?
Well, I think the question for me is, does the leader of Canada's official opposition deserve a residence? And one of the key points that Elizabeth May is making is that no other official opposition leader in, I believe, the Commonwealth has access to a residence like this. And so, just some quick, fast, fun facts. So the residence that Poilievre does reside in has 19 main rooms and is approximately 9,500 square feet. It's served by a staff of 3, a chef, a chauffeur, and a household administrator. It's not open to the public. It needs this kind of renovation. Why is it that, we provide a residence, obviously, for the Prime Minister, but why is it that the leader of the opposition gets access to this property? I'd like to see it renovated, restored and refurbished, and then made open to the public for tours. Okay. That, I think, is, what I want to see happen.
Jim, last 30 seconds to you. Is this about saving dollars and cents? How political do you see this petition being?
It's really symbolic and it's political. The amount of money spent is fairly minimal. Perhaps the Prime Minister could move in and Poilievre could move out. That might solve our problem with the $50 or $100 million they're going to spend on Sussex Drive. So, it's mainly performative politics as usual, I think.
Hadn't thought of that one. That's a good suggestion. All right, we'll have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News about Meta building its first Canadian data center in Sturgeon County, just north of Edmonton. Neil Citron's optimistic, writing, if the province can generate some revenue from it for the citizens, that would be great. Dedicated isn't as big on it, asking, how do we fight back against this deal with catastrophic ecological damage that we cannot even begin to quantify? According to Hébert, Albertans should be paying very close attention to their electricity bills in the coming years. Full Frost writes, amazing news. Everyone should look at the tech that will make this one of the most environmentally friendly data centers. And Fib weighs in with this, makes more water, more electricity, more money in the economy, and more AI. What's not to love? have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow with the tech giant behind Facebook and Instagram, bringing that $13 billion data center to Sturgeon County, we will hear from the local mayor on what it will bring to the industrial heartland. That's on Friday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.